So, John, let's transition and wrap up with a new feature here on the State of Recruiting
Yes,
podcast, and that
sir.
is the State of Recruiting Comp Series, where John is going to take a player that in this 2023 class, and as we transition to the next class, and just say kind of as you look, is there a comp that just comes home, John? I know you and I are on the same page on one thing: hate forced comps. But sometimes you're watching a kid and you're like, you and I had this conversation last year at Notre Dame at Tobias Merriweather, who was a SI 99 kid, top 50 kid for you at SI 99. And you're just like, I can't help but think of T. Higgins every time I watch this kid play. It just comes to you. And you've got some kids that you think that are great comps for. And we're going to start that series tonight. And your first comp that you want to make is for, I believe, the top receiver in the country on the SI 99. That is Brandon Inniss, who is currently an Ohio State commit, John. So who's the comp and what do you see?
Yeah, heck of a place to start with. Brandon Inniss, maybe the kid I've seen the most in this class of 2023. So naturally, like you said, it just kind of comes to you. And when you watch Brandon Inniss, who's a verified 6 foot, 185, 190 pounds or so, when you watch him, he doesn't strike you coming off the bus. He doesn't strike you in his pre-snap stance. He might not even strike you thereafter. But when the ball is in the air, and all things are even, whether he's got a DB draped all over him or it's a little bit stretching towards that catch radius, he is there. And then you start to watch his route construction and the polish and the lower body dominance. And it just, the more we watched him, the more we were like, this is kind of John Mechie-ish. John Mechie, the former Alabama receiver who's now with the Houston Texans, second-round draft pick just this past spring. He was kind of the glue. Everyone talked about Jameson Williams at Alabama like, oh my gosh, he's blowing the top off of the defense, all this stuff. Mechie was the glue guy. He was the counter. He was 3rd and 6, catch it over the middle, absorb a hit, move the chains type of target, the safety outlet, security blanket for Bryce Young in that Heisman campaign. And there's really not one elite trait about John Mechie. Official combine measurements, 5'11", 187. He didn't run the 40, but he's in that 4.5 range. Nothing screams elite singularly. But everywhere else, John Mechie is right on the doorstep and highly, highly productive and safe on top of that. So if you're putting out a grade, a letter grade for every trait that you would create in a wide receiver, right? What are the most important ones, Brian? We talk about polish, the ability to come out of your breaks, hands, body control, awareness, speed, the ability after the catch. On all those fronts, just about, John Mechie's like an A-, B+. Nothing is like, oh my gosh, put him there, number one, don't even worry about it. And when we talk about Brandon Inniss, it's like the same thing. Nothing is sexy. Like nothing is super flashy with the kid. But you look up and he's got 9 catches for 210 yards on a nationally televised type of game. So there's nothing individually relative to his traits that screams, I'm the best receiver in this class. But when you collectively put it all together, it's really hard to poke a hole in Brandon Inniss's game. He is an elite route runner, an elite physical player, whether it's at the catch point or even as a blocker, something we don't talk about nearly enough when we talk wide receivers. The catch radius is elite. The body control along the sidelines and awareness is as good as it gets in this class. He's just not 6'4" and running by everybody. But everything else you ask for at the position, which again, when we translate it to the college game, not the NFL, that's what we're talking about. Which guys are going to be great? Which guy at receiver? Which guys are going to catch 150 balls in college? And the first name that I'm throwing up in that conversation is Brandon Inniss. Just like in the draft class last year, a lot more buzz for the Ohio State guys, Jameson Williams, all these other players. And I'm like, John Mechie's going to catch a bunch of balls for a long time. Now, he's had some health issues. He's fighting leukemia, my goodness, at this point. Hopefully speedy recovery there. But just on the field, you just feel like, man, this is a safe, reliable option. Because, again, we get lost in the 9 routes and the deep balls and the 40 times and all that, which is great. But football is about 3rd and 7. 3rd and 7, your first read or that receiver who has the awareness to break off his route relative to the blitz that's incoming and makes that play in the margins. That's what the game is about, the intermediate passing game. And in this class of 2023, there is no player I'd rather have in that regard than Brandon Inniss. And that's a lot of the same stuff we would say about John Mechie the last few years at Alabama, and hopefully for him going forward at the NFL level. So like you said, BD, the best comps are organic. They're not forced. You're not just trying to put someone in a height and weight and 40 time and shuttle time box. It's about the feel
in the game,
how they play the game.
Yeah.
There's a catch John Mechie made against Miami, I think game 1 last year, a rare off-target ball from Bryce Young, and it was just a total incompletion. But Mechie snapped, his front leg and went back against the grain towards the sidelines and snagged it for a first down on it was 3rd and 6 and 3rd and 7, kind of that same marginal play. And you're just like, that won't make any highlight reels, but man, that's important to keep the sticks moving and keep things rolling. I think he actually scored a touchdown like 2 plays later. So not scary in any one category, but collectively, they'll just give you nightmares when you get into the film and you get into the 4-quarter matchup that is Brandon Inniss and or a John Mechie.
I don't think it's a coincidence, John, that in the 2 games in which Alabama did not have John Mechie, that Bryce Young threw 4 touchdowns and 3 picks. I mean, yes, good teams, right? But I don't think that's a coincidence because, as you said, you had a redshirt freshman quarterback. That was his security blanket. He was to that offense what tight ends tend to be for a lot of other offenses. That, hey, I get in 3rd and 6, I just got to get it in John Mechie's direction, as the play that you talked about. And doing it that early in the season sends a message to your new quarterback. Hey, man, just get it near us, and we're going to go get this thing. And you mentioned the 100 balls. John Mechie had 96 catches last year and didn't play in Alabama's last 2 games. I mean, he's
unreal.
Well over 100 catches. And I think if he doesn't get hurt, I think Alabama's national champs. I do. I think that they beat Georgia in the championship game if just one of those 2 receivers stays healthy. I know Georgia fans may not like that, and I can't prove that. That's just kind of how it felt like the game was going early, and we saw what they did in the SEC title game. But to your point, that is a quarterback's best friend, a guy that I don't have to be perfect all the time. I'm getting pressure. Where's Brandon Inniss? Where's John Mechie? I think those guys in today's game are every bit as valuable and sometimes more so than the Tyreek Hills, who's a phenomenal player. But a quarterback wants that guy that I know I can go to in any situation, any circumstance. I don't have to be precise with my timing, my read, or my accuracy every time I throw him the ball. And I think you're absolutely right. And I didn't see it at first, John, because most of the film I watched of Brandon early was his quarterback film.
Right.
And because he's not a super twitchy kid, a big kid, like I said, like got that Tyler Williams track, sprinting thing. He doesn't have the super suddenness and explosiveness of a Nathaniel Branch or Zachariah Branch, excuse me. He doesn't have those traits. It's just that is a position, as much as any in football, that is every much the technical, cerebral needs just as much as the physical needs. And I think that's what separates Brandon Inniss. That's why he's my number 1 quarterback in the class. I think it's why he's your number 1 quarterback in the class. And I think the John Mechie comp makes a lot of sense because the other thing you talk about, once Mechie got the ball in his hands, basically turned into a running back.
Right.
And I see a lot of that in Brandon Inniss. And that's where you see that quarterback play last year transition, because he would take that thing and just say, okay, I got the ball now. Let me go do something with it. And strong lower half. I mean, that's the other thing you talk about. That strong lower half is another reason he's dangerous in open space. And just a guy you want on your team. So I really like that Brandon Inniss comp right there. That's a good one to start with.
I think Brandon's a good example too of, like you said, first of all, what a 12 months for him. Quarterback goes down early at American Heritage last year, and Brandon Inniss, number 1 receiver in the class, is moving to quarterback, trying to figure that out. I mean, just kind of a funky situation for him. But now all things are even. He's back at receiver and had a 200-yard game to kick off his senior season against Lowndes High School in Georgia, which is one of the better high schools in the South. Just some absurd wins at the catch point in game 1. And again, he wasn't 20 yards behind the DB catching touchdowns. He was over the DB catching touchdowns and excellent after the catch. So the physicality, the competitiveness that he brings to the position, I think is something that will translate regardless of scheme, regardless of system, and regardless of the other receivers that are going to inevitably be around him and probably hyped more than him. And in that regard, it's kind of fitting. You know, he's going to Ohio State where they've got this absurd wide receiver class that when you start to break it down, everyone else is taller than Brandon Inniss, those other three guys. We talk about Noah Rogers being this huge, big physical catch radius guy. Carnell Tate, this 6'2", smooth like wide receiver who could win at all three levels. You know, we see all this stuff. And then Bryson Rogers down in Florida, another big target with a great wingspan. You don't get to Inniss until you talk about some of those other guys. Yet I'll make this prediction: if they all go to Ohio State and all play in this great offense that we're going to see on the field here this fall and stay healthy, yeah, all things even, right? Brandon Inniss will be the most productive of this group because he wins in those margins and he does the little things well. His floor is higher than the ceiling with some of these other recruits that they're bringing in. And I think that's where, again, it's easy to talk about that one trait with another recruit. But again, collectively, Brandon Inniss checks about every box. He just doesn't check it as highly as some of these other receivers that we talk about. So big fan of his. And I think a guy who's just going to make us all look smarter by having that number 1 next to his name at the wide receiver position.
I think that I'm willing to go with you here. If everything is equal, I don't think there's any doubt that if you take the last 2 classes of receivers together, nobody catches more passes than he does. Now maybe
that's saying a lot.
Maybe somebody has more yards, kind of like what we saw, you know, like last year. If John Mechie doesn't get hurt, I think he catches more passes than Jameson Williams, but he definitely doesn't have more yards than Jameson Williams. And I think that's the kind of thing I look at. Well, actually, John Mechie had more catches than Jameson Williams last year. Jameson had more yards. I think we will see that. It'll be a situation where he's a volume guy. He'll have more third down catches than any receiver in the class. He'll have more total catches. I mean, he'll have more. He'll just be that money player, and I just don't think anybody else on the roster has that. And that's saying a lot when you consider how well Ohio State's recruited that position the last 2 years.
Yeah,
that's no small shake. So a very, very talented football player, and I think that's what the position has become. Right? I mean, if you look at the NFL, it's the Devontae Adams types, it's the Cooper Kupps types, it's the guy that maybe aren't the explosive. I mean, Tyreek Hill's a phenomenal player. He's the highlight reel guy, right? But it's those other guys that are every bit as productive and they're just different. And I think that's kind of what the position is really turning to. Is you're fast and you're all this but can you play? Do you know how to get open?
It's polished. Yeah. It's a polished business. And those guys, I'll throw in like a Stephon Diggs in that conversation too. Those guys can all break you down at the line of scrimmage. And then if you're still in the game at the top of the route, they can break you down there as well. It's not about running by you. They're breaking you down from a technical perspective. And that's, like you said, in this basketball on grass version of football, that's what wins and creates these open windows for QBs.
And you're not going to have the big separation in the NFL as you will in college, right? And so they want those guys that can not only be great route runners to create whatever separation you can, but can you win at the catch point? And that's the other part of what makes Devontae Adams great. I mean, the playoff touchdown he had, was it a touchdown or was it a deep ball that he had in the playoffs last year? Where just scoops off the ground. Cooper Kupp makes crazy catches in traffic, right? That's the other part of it too, John, that I think Brandon Inniss. So the ability to knows how to get open, knows how to position his body in a way where this guy's on me, but if I can just get my body here, he can't get to the ball, and I know he's not knocking out of my hands. There's a lot to be said for that for a kid who didn't even play the position for the most of his junior. His intellectual feel for the game is outstanding, and I think that's talk about he doesn't check all the boxes. That's the one box he flat out checks is this is a kid that just knows how to play the game of football. And there's a lot to be said for that.
100%. Yeah. Safest bet, maybe in the whole class. And I think that says a lot, right? If we talk about checking a box, I think I would bank on Brandon Inniss above just about any other player. There's some high floor quarterbacks.
Certainly on offense.
Arch Manning. Yeah. I think high floor and safe bet wise, this is where the conversation begins for me in evaluating this class of 2023. And then I know we talk about Friday nights, and that's obviously the most important data point we could ever gather. But if there was ever a recruit to bring up 7-on-7 with, it's with Brandon Inniss, because he's probably taken the most 7-on-7 reps in the history of the sport, or whatever we want to call it. And you see these traits come out. Oftentimes we were like, it's not real football and all that stuff. And that's true. But when you talk about receivers and DBs and the ball in the air and things like that, it's a whole lot of translation to what we
Sure.
see on Fridays and eventually Saturdays. And in those regards, everyone else will tell you Brandon Inniss is the baddest dude. Carnell Tate on the same team, Malachi Nelson on the same team. They're telling you, Brandon Inniss, that's the guy. That's the guy. So I think that, also creates a lot more benefit of the doubt in trying to rank these guys and all those things.
John, we could do a whole show on the value of 7-on-7 or not amongst, as far as evaluating kids. But here's what it tells me about Brandon Inniss. He's already ranked high. He's a highly ranked kid. He's going to Ohio State. He has all his offers. There's nothing to gain by him competing as much as he competes in all these events. What it tells me above everything else beyond, because I don't really care a lot about receivers being aggressive going after the ball when they know they can't get hit.
Right.
It doesn't, but for a fracky kid that has nothing to prove, that is going to look for every opportunity to go compete, that right there is one of the things I love. That's what I take away. This kid has nothing to prove. What does he need to go to 7-on-7s for? If anything, he runs the more risk of hurting his reputation or his brand or his body by coming these. And I love kids that compete. And that's the kind of guy you look at and say, because what I love about guys like that is when his hammy's tight, when his ankle's sore, when his shoulder's sore, when he's got a dislocated finger, he's still going to answer the bell.
Yep.
He's going to answer the bell. When he's in Columbus and it's 25 degrees, the weekend they're going to play Michigan, and he's not going to be used to that. But when the whistle blows, it's not going to faze him because he's going to compete. And I think there is a lot to be said by that. And that, to me, more than anything, is why his IQ and that competitiveness, more than anything, or why I would agree that you could make a strong case that there's not a higher floor in this class on the offensive class than Brandon Inniss, if not the whole class. And so I think it made some great points there. And again, sounds a lot like John Mechie, except one difference. I think that Brandon is more advanced as a receiver than John was coming out of high school, who was, early on looked like more of a safety prospect with some people than he was a receiver. So I think the sky is certainly the limit for Brandon Inniss.
Yeah, that's a good point. The biggest difference was the development. Mechie coming from Canada and then eventually playing prep school ball in the States, or as opposed to Inniss growing up in South Florida, just spotlight from middle school, where he started to get scholarship offers. So yeah, that's the biggest difference. So when you start talking about coming in ready to go, I think Inniss will hit that ground running, regardless of who's in that wide receiver room at Ohio State, which is a hard sentence to put together given the talent they have there. He's going to find his way on the field, and he'll be productive soon thereafter. So yeah, big fans there. And the heck of a way to kick off our State of Recruiting comp series. Brandon Inniss, John Mechie, link them together, height, weight, skill set, and floor. And I think that, when we stack up these careers statistically, maybe we'll see something similar in a couple years when Brandon wraps up there in Columbus, Ohio.